Welcome to Galaxy Brains.
An infinite amount of cash.
I'm your host, Alex Thorn.
The U.S. banking system is sound and resilient.
Bitcoin made a new all-time high.
If you're not long, you're short.
Satoshi's going to come on there, laugh hysterically, go quiet. All Bitcoin's going to be erased.
Bitcoin's the best crypto out there.
Bitcoin is going to zero.
Welcome back to Galaxy Brains. As always, I'm your host, Alex Thorn, head of firm-wide research at Galaxy. Bitcoin not zero, and we have a great episode for you today. Dan Matuszewski from CMS Holdings is our guest. He's back. It's his third appearance. We tend to have Dan on at the beginning of every year, and I get into it with Dan about what he's expecting from macro and politics in the markets, what his thoughts are on the new hot metas that we're likely to see in crypto trading, and narratives that will drive gains in this market in the year ahead. And it's a great conversation, as always, with Dan. And of course, we'll check in with our good friend Bimnet Abibi from Galaxy Trading to talk about this new inflation number. Markets up a fair amount today, both equities and Bitcoin and crypto. Bitcoin trading over 99K as I record this now on Wednesday, January 15th. Before we get to all of that, I need to remind you, please refer to the link to the disclaimer in the podcast notes and note that none of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Galaxy or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Let's hop right into the show. Let's go now to our friend Bimnet Abibi from Galaxy Trading. As always, Bimnet, welcome back to Galaxy Brains.
Thanks for having me.
I always love having you on, especially on a morning like this. It is January 15th, 2025. We got, what the headline looked like a flat to semi-soft CPI, and markets reacted very positively today. Bitcoin, as we speak, is trading at $99.1 thousand per coin. And, stock markets are up over 1%, basically. NASDAQ's up 2% as we talk. Yep. What did you see in the data, and is the market right to be trading higher on it?
The data was, what I would constitute in line. The unrounded core month-on-month number came in at 0.23. The median on Bloomberg was 0.25, right?
For expectations.
For expectations. And so, the fact that you got the 0.23 meant that the month-on-month got rounded to a 0.2. So, visually, it looks softer than it actually is. And then drilling down into some of the components, right? Owner's equivalent rent, aka housing, is a really large part of the figure, around 40%, and that actually showed a month-on-month increase from November, and it printed a 0.3 month-on-month, which is like basically saying that housing costs are going up at 3.6% annualized or somewhere around there. And you also had insurance rates, auto prices, airline fares, things that people spend, good money on, also kind of suggest higher prices. And so, I think the market reaction is more a function of positioning and kind of risk reward at current levels. And so equities had been trading heavy for the past month. Treasuries had sold off for the past couple of months, and dollar was gigabid as well, for the entirety of that time. And so when you actually got a little bit of relief, aka a number that was mostly in line, you had an outsized reaction in the market, and crypto benefited, right? And I would say that absent crypto-specific policies that are going to come from the Trump administration, one thing that's super notable to me is that, Bitcoin and broader crypto is really trading like a risk asset at this point in time, right? And every, crypto trader that I speak to or I know is like watching CPI as if they were trading interest rate products, right? And so, you've gotten to the point where the asset class has matured. It's also grown to a sizable, asset, right? And it's worth, I don't know what the broader crypto market is worth here, maybe $3 trillion, right?
3.5, maybe even
3.5, right? That is massive, right? And so, I think its correlation should naturally pick up to, things like equities. And so, I think that's going to be a story on a go forward basis. Absent, very crypto specific things that the Trump administration is going to do. But when an asset gets this big, right, it just starts to perform like every other risk asset on the planet. But in terms of my takeaways, inflation is a bit less concerning than what the market had thought, and that is driving the back end of the yield curve in the U.S. A bit lower. However, I still think the story of 2025 is really going to be driven by that kind of back 10-year point in the U.S. rate curve. And I still think that you are at risk of seeing yields above 5% at some point this year. Now, it could be a function of just how strong the economy is going to be under a Trump administration, right? Like, he is very pro-growth, pro-business. He will deregulate. He will try to stimulate via tax policies, and there might be some offset with tariff policy. However, he's a president that views the stock market as his report card. And so when you have that happening, and a Fed that told you that they're going to be less inclined to cut, or the bar for cutting is higher, I do think that's going to naturally put some pressure on the back end of the curve. In addition, there's just not enough term premium in the curve, right? Like, you're talking about historically low levels of term premium and a ton of supply that's going to need to get absorbed by the market. And it also seems like Besant is going to be a little bit counter to the policies that we've had under Yellen in terms of issuance. Yellen was more focused on increasing issuance in the front end of the curve, particularly in T-bills. I think Besant will be a little bit more balanced with his approach, and that'll naturally necessitate a higher term premium. And so you could see a scenario where the Fed isn't cutting or hiking, and yet the 10-year point in the curve and the 30-year and the back end more broadly is continuing to sell off. And I think that might present some challenges for risk assets rallying further.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's what people have been really quite concerned about. I think it's interesting you point that with, that the number isn't as soft, the CPI number isn't as soft as it might seem, and that there are these longer risks here for particularly rates related that can pressure risk assets. To me, it was more like if it, with on the back of the hawkish cut by the Fed, and then the other numbers that had come out that were, bearish or tough,
Strong.
Strong. Thank you. Strong, right? The other beats that we had seen in the data, it was more like if it sort of felt like the expectation was that this would be a bit of a hot number too, and that would have continued this sort of risk off regime that equities have been in since, right after the election. Bitcoin and crypto have been in for at least about a month, but this is sort of like a pause maybe to the correction, the sell-off. It sort of feels like.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. But I will also note that, certain trends are still continuing, right? Like, the dollar is still incredibly good. And you had a brief kind of sell off in the dollar on the back of this data, but that the market totally went the other way, basically an hour later. And so, like, the things that are, structurally bullish the dollar or, bearish the rest of the world, those trends are still in place, right? Like, the fiscal situation in the UK, although they had a little bit of a soft inflation number that caused their fixed income market to rally, but like, that's not going away, right? Like, China's economy is still not doing great. And, EM, has to deal with a strong dollar, and that's generally not good for inflation if you're importing a ton of your goods. And so, like, there's a lot of challenges out there in the marketplace. But with respect to crypto, though, I think that the trend is pretty clear till inauguration, right? Like, you do have a bunch of executive actions that will come, and some of them are likely going to be bullish crypto. And so as long as the market has that hope, I do think that crypto will kind of remain bid. The question is, after the fact, is there a little bit of disappointment from market participants? Is there a realization that the wheels of government move slowly, and that, executive orders are, important, but in terms of actually leading to real change and structural changes in the crypto market, that typically takes time.
Yeah.
And even if institutions are all of a sudden like, a lot friendlier to crypto and engaging in more activities, like that change in these institutions does not happen overnight, right? Take the banking system, like it takes months, like to get anything over the line at one of these bulge bracket firms.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
just
That makes
because
sense.
there's a policy change or tune shift, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll see the change day one. And I think that this market's very fickle, and so if you don't see you know prices continuing to go higher and more positive catalysts, like you'll stall out at a certain point. And so I think you're meant to you know there's decent risk reward to staying long crypto going into inauguration, particularly now that some of the macro concerns have abated.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I totally agree with your point about how likely it is that we're going to see anything actually happen soon. I think you will get some announcements and policy changes, but enacting those will take a while. There was a great headline I saw this morning. I know you saw as well, that Trump's SEC is expected to halt or pause enforcements and possibly pause or withdraw crypto-related litigation matters that are in court. We've expected that. We wrote about that back in November to our clients and counterparties, that specifically that those two things were likely. But even those are short-term sort of exemptive relief. It doesn't sort of portend necessarily what the long-term path will be for the SEC. And we don't expect that guy, Paul Atkins, if he does get confirmed, to tap until April.
Yeah. So, just think about it in the case of Coinbase, right? They have been fighting the SEC for a really long time. They have listed a ton of different tokens, and they've essentially operated as if you're going to have a regime shift, and the SEC's been in the wrong, and eventually they'll get rectified. And so in terms of less litigation but by the SEC, or less enforcement, like I don't necessarily know if that's going to change how anybody's like operated in a meaningful way. And so again, the wheels of government move slowly, and I think folks just have to be patient. I think you're still talking about a year where Bitcoin's likely to continue to rally.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's what we watch for. And if you're interested in watching the inauguration, I will say, in Kalshi, the legal and regulated betting prediction market, has some interesting ones around what the president-elect may say in the inauguration. And in general, though, I would encourage people.
Well, after the inauguration, he will be president, no longer the president.
That's true.
No.
But yes, crypto is converging on Washington, D.C. this weekend. I will be there, and so will many others. And I think so. You may see reporting or announcements or who knows what. But it is certainly going to be exciting. By this time this time next week, in next week's episode, there will be a new presidential administration. So it's the ride is just beginning. The crypto presidency.
Yeah, it is going to be a very exciting 100 days.
Yeah.
But I will say the last thing to end on is that, you have to think that, Trump is going to operate like a second term president, right? There is no reelection worry for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he will pursue, the policies that he thinks are accurate. And, like he doesn't have to, like normally, like if you're a first term president, you have 100 days to essentially enact your policies. And after those 100 days, you've spent most of your political capital, and you have to start worrying about reelection and the next presidential cycle. So, in a first term presidency, your first 100 days are the most important, but in a second term presidency, like every day is just as important. And
Yeah.
I keep going back to the bucket speech that Obama gave, in his first
White House Press Corps Association's dinner. Yes.
dinner. Yes, it was like immigration policy, bucket, executive action, education policy. You know what? Bucket, executive action. And so that's the
throw it
philosophy,
in the bucket.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what he meant by a bucket, but
that's what he meant. You put it in the bucket. I'm not sure what else he could have meant.
Yes.
No, you're right. That dynamic is going to change, not just on crypto for this president and this presidential term, but not just on crypto, possibly on other big ticket items, taxes, immigration, foreign policy,
entitlement spending.
Exactly. So. And maybe even government efficiency, although I think we're all sort of, not holding our breath for that. But look, he's got the world's richest man in charge of figuring that out for him. So I guess we'll see what happens there too. Bimnet Abibi, my friend from Galaxy Trading, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Let's go now to our guest, Dan Matuszewski, CMS Holdings. Dan, welcome back to Galaxy Brains.
Thanks for having me. I think we just said this is 3 years in a row now.
Yeah, this will be your third appearance, and it's always been like January, February, March. I think maybe last year we were a little bit later in Q1, but I always like talking with you to figure out what you're thinking about for the new year. The markets, I mean, I think you came on first. It was 22. It's a very different market.
It was bad. I do remember that. I was like, I don't know, man. I hope it works out. Like,
yeah, you were
I
like,
think
that's
you caught
nice.
right after everything fell down.
Yeah,
it got a lot worse too.
Well, we did a great one too. We were talking about. I asked you a question. I said, Justin's son, a good trader or the best trader? And you were talking about how he creates the top ticks and the bottoms.
Yeah, I'll say this. Like, it always seems like he's on the ropes, and he just manages to find a way to keep doing it. Though I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. He's involved in the Trump World Liberty thing now.
I saw that. He bought a lot of the Wolfie token, which is what I call it. Yeah, you're right. He seems like there was like mean journalism pieces about how he was like a dangerous like psychopath to work for. I think the SEC has sued him, but yet he just seems to be like appearing places buying those bananas.
I know. He just pops up and he's like, "Hey, I'm still here." I don't know. It always seems like he's like out, and then like HTX doesn't seem like it's ever in good shape, but it's still I don't know. It is what it is. But
everyone's always perpetually wondering if he's using it as his own like personal piggy bank, or like people track the creates of like whatever it is, like Justin Sun BTC or whatever, because they get sent in and out of HTX. No one really knows.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of smoke, but like I said, I don't have any inside base, but we don't use the exchange, so I think, as far as I know, it's still a thing. But yeah, like again, a lot of smoke, but he's still here. And he's still
welcome back.
Creating tops and bottoms.
We're on the cusp of, I think, what many, including myself, believe is a possible revolution in the handling of crypto markets in the U.S. Like, what are your first thoughts here on what crypto, whether the market or in regulation or whatever? Like, give us your thoughts on on this eve of the presidential inauguration. What are your thoughts now as an American in crypto?
Better, right? Like, I mean, like, it seems that, look, it's definitely better. It's unclear, like, what level of sort of ability to operate from the U.S. is coming. But, like, I don't know if you're going to be able, as, like, a U.S. person in New York, go sign up for Binance. But we're going to be moving a lot closer to that than we are the current setup, where you just effectively can't even operate most, maybe all businesses that are specifically retail facing, but even if you're just like touching the network from the States, right? So I think it's really good that we're going to have a lot of like onshoring back of jobs. I mean, like, a lot of people are here, right? They're like physically here. They've just sort of had to incorporate overseas or hire a bunch of people that are like outside the US. I think it's like going to pull a lot of that more in and be like, hey, we're actually here. Like, we're looking to operate, set up base, like work with the local officials. It's good. I think that's all. But I think it's somebody who's been doing this for a while. Like, I'm sure you can relate. It's just wild that this is like actual presidential campaign talking point, and like effectively marginally at least moved the needle for his election. So it's weird. Like, it's weird that it's like in the narrative, and like there's bills being proposed about like adding Bitcoin and whatnot. Like, it's a wild time. It's like really, like, you made it, right? Like, we kind of like finally like got there. It's a little more polarizing politically than I thought it would have been when it got here, but like it made the conversation nonetheless. So it's just a wild thing to see.
Yeah, it's like you're in this niche area, and friends, family that you don't work with for years are like, oh, you do that Bitcoin thing or the crypto stuff. Even Trump at the end of his speech in Nashville was like, go have fun with your Bitcoin and your cryptos and things or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, on the other hand, he did win the majority of the popular vote, and he did and he talks about it a lot. It's kind of hard, I think, for detractors to claim it's not a thing at a minimum.
I mean, yeah, and his kids are running a DeFi company. Like he's done NFTs. It's pretty pervasive, like in the admin. Whether or not like it's like the key policy issue, like is unclear, and we'll see like as that unfolds as he gets in. But like, it's definitely like in there, like it's part of it. They're not just like, hey, this is interesting. They're like, I don't know, they're kicking it around.
Yeah, I mean, Trump said he wanted America to become a Bitcoin superpower and the crypto capital of the world. I mean, that's not
It's
like
a far
tame
cry
language.
from where we've seen regulators and elected officials previously. So
Yeah. Well, you and I think and maybe others, you can tell us, you were one of the first people to get into politics and crypto, the sort of fundraising and contributions game with the GMI pack, I recall a few years ago. What was that? And just given how much money the crypto industry played in 24, like what's your take on sort of that evolution from GMI to Fair Shake and everything in between?
yeah, so this was kind of like a wild one to see, and it actually it started off really exciting. It got really hairy, and then it like got really exciting again. So when it started, Vance from Framework and me had been talking mostly about our frustration of dealing with the current sort of politically facing like things like right, like there wasn't a real pack. There was a couple small ones. I think Coinbase had the corporate one, which is very low limits. But there wasn't a material fundraising thing to like go and actually like play in races. There was the Blockchain Association, there's Coin Center, like there still is, and like they're boots on the ground, sort of like lobbying, but that all felt reactive as opposed to like being offensive, right? So I think the idea was we need to like make actually this thing a clear political point such that elected officials either want to take a closer look at it and form an opinion, like whether or not that's right or wrong, or at least like realize that it's like something they need to be paying attention to, or to like potentially make it a negative if you're coming out against it, right? Being like, hey, there's a voting block of people that are supporting saying that they don't want sort of this. And so we got started and we're like, all right, we'll kick this thing going. We put some of the initial funding in to pay to get that thing off the ground for GMI. So GMI was a pack that was the precursor to Fair Shake, and we played a big role in the 22 election. I say we, but like I wasn't doing any of the political thought or like how to like spend the money or like do the ads. Like, I don't know any of that world. But we found two guys who were very very well suited to like run that, who now run Fair Shake. And GMI did through the 22 cycle, had pretty good success. I think burnt close to like $10 or $12 million. Burnt, but like used, like they were able to raise, and a lot of the larger investors, like people that participated and donated in 24 were in GMI as well. So it just like slowly transformed over. The reason it like rebranded and moved was one is FTX had just done like so much damage for the political spending in like, I mean, that stuff's kind of gotten quiet now, but like that was obviously like a big thing in the news. It was a big thing. Like Ryan Salem went to jail. Like there was a lot of like dirt and bad smoke, and like so anything from that era had to sort of like be rebranded out. And also the big anchor sort of donors to Fair Shake, so A16Z, Coinbase, Ripple, Kraken, whatever, they wanted more control of it, as they would, right? Like they were going to be throwing hundreds of millions of dollars around. They wanted it like rebranded, skinned, and they wanted to control the whole thing. But for all purposes, like the political mind and strategy is the same people that moved over. So like they're in that currently. And that continue to run that great. I mean, they're talking about having $100 million now for the midterms in 2026 too. There's a lot of people like looking to kick money up. So it's real. I think it was the largest single issue pack out there. Like I think the top ones were like the Biden one and the Trump one as like the two actual ones, like besides Act Blue and Wid Red or whatever. So like it's material, like it's big, like it has a lot of like it has the ability to like affect sort of like change that the crypto industry wants to see out there. I think a lot of people view that as like, oh, like you just like buy races, but at the end of the day, like candidates win races. Like the sort of ability to put people in there, you can guide, but it's not like, hey, we want this person that just like happens. Like that's not like a thing. And this was very clear when I don't know if you remember this or caught this, but there was like an Oregon House seat. There was a very pro crypto guy. I forget his name offhand. I think his name was Matt. Who was running, but anyway, so SBF burnt $14 million in that primary to like try to win that race, and lost, and I actually lost kind of, but like for retrospect, like $14 million is an insane amount of money to spend in a primary, in a new district. It didn't even have an incumbent, and like ended up getting beat by somebody who raised like 750,000 or something like that. So like it doesn't necessarily mean things happen, but it is good to be able to like flex your muscle and sort of like show the industry. It also just sends a signal, right? Where like, you're like, hey, these people like care, they're here to play. Like you can't just come out guns blazing against it and think that there's not going to be some pushback. So I think that's been like, as a deterrent, like a really good thing for our industry in particular.
Did you
So yeah,
see
that's my political sort of transformation as like things have gone on.
It's incredible. I mean, not just obviously the market from 21 and 2, whether we're talking about that sort of great speculative mania from 21 and 2, or the collapses in 22 to where we are now on the political side. I mean, the politicians were running for cover or dancing on our graves after FTX collapsed. And that totally turned around.
It did. I mean, look, it helped the market turn around, but it also, I think it was good that there was sort of a cleanup that occurred. Like it was bad, right? 22, like there's a lot of companies falling down. You could basically put the crypto companies on like a dartboard and just hit one and they would be like insolvent within the next 3 months. Like it was rough. And like it sucked for a while, but we came out the other side. We didn't need any bailouts. Nobody like had to like intervene from the government like they did on the justice side retroactively, but we were able to like move through it and come out, and people were still interested, and like the price was rallying, and we got like, you look at it now and it's like, all right, like we're kind of just like back to where it was, and like it continues on. And even the stuff that was like most associated, like Solana in particular, right? Like there was like a world where people were like, this was part of the FTX fraud, like this is just like garbage, and now it's back to its highs, like proving sort of that there was more there than just sort of that world. So anyway, yeah, no, it was not great for a bit, but it seems we're on the upswing, and now we're entrenched in the current party.
Yeah, now we're the industry's throwing a crypto ball on Friday in Washington.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
Are you gonna go?
No, but I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be like the characters.
It's really like just surreal. I will be there, and I'll report back as to the surreal nature of the experience, which I really am. I mean, I've been to Washington D.C. many times personally as a representative of Galaxy or the crypto industry, and I've seen it from over the last. The roller coaster down there has been truly wild. So. I can't imagine what it's going to be like the next few. Well, let's imagine. What do you think is going to actually happen? You got any predictions on like how it's going to be better for crypto?
Yeah. So I think, look, day one, you get new appointments, right? Like you're not going to get Genser's out, like the head of all the agencies that have been like poking and prodding us, the OCC, the CFTC, I don't know, all the 3 and 4 letter acronyms, right? So you get like the people going into those positions are going to be more dovish for the crypto industry. So like that day one is going to like help. So that's like the first like thing that's like an easy, like clear, like this is going to change. As far as the larger stuff that's getting kicked around, I mean, like you had this article about the SPR, other people have like come out. I think that is like a bigger political hurdle than I think people like are making it. And then now they're talking about executive orders and all this stuff. But like at the end of the day, like it's like unclear the larger public cares about this in any capacity. Like if you're in crypto and Bitcoin, you're like all about it. But I see like very little momentum for that to continue on. So I'm sort of the camp that if this is like going to be actually put through, it's going to be a while. It's like not going to be like the top issue that they're like running through Congress. If it happens at all. And it may just like quietly die in the night, sort of thing. I think it'd be good if they stopped selling the seized Bitcoin, but now it seems like they've sold them or working on it anyway, so that may not matter. I think there was a chance that that supply was going to get just like sort of earmarked, like, hey, we'll just like hold on to this and not do anything. But it does seem more likely that that's getting chucked. So that is not like an issue anymore going forward. I think the larger stuff, like you'll maybe get a stablecoin bill through at some point in the first like year, but everything else is probably not going to like get through Congress. I think the first 6 months are going to be dominated by the tax cut extensions. Like that's got to get through. That's like the thing they're talking about already that seems to be big on people's minds. And then they're going to do something on immigration reform. So I think those things matter more for the American people. And I think that's a bigger political issue for everybody. And the crypto stuff, while it's going to be dovish, like I don't think it's top of mind for anybody for a bit. So I think maybe we'll see what stuff looks like by summer. And I think we got to get an idea of like how this Congress works together, right? Like this is my concern is everybody thinks it's so rosy and perfect right now, but it's really unclear how this is going to shake out when it actually gets to the floor. So we'll see how maybe everything just moves through. Like maybe everybody's just on the same page and like legislation is just like ripping through. But like that is not historically like how things have been like going in my lifetime through Congress. And if they're moving really slow and there's gridlock and like people are fighting and like parties are fragmenting, then nothing's happening. So I think that's sort of where we're going to see stuff go. I'm very curious. Trump has said multiple times, right, that he's going to pardon Ross day one. I think that's going to be a pretty good litmus test of like, hey, like, is this like really like, is he going to do this? Is this like how pro crypto, not necessarily that's like the most pro crypto angle thing that he can be doing, but like that'll be big, I think, to see that happens like ASAP. And I have no reason to believe he won't. I think that'll be like your first marker that you see of like path going forward.
Yeah, I think that would be a fascinating litmus test. I mean, if he delivers, I think it's not necessarily prescriptive that he'll do other crypto stuff soon if he does do it. But I think if he doesn't do it, then you have to start wondering about some of this. And it doesn't have to be literally like day one, but like, like
no, but right, like the
first month or so like that. Yeah.
If it's like March and it's like hasn't happened, it's going to be like, oh, like where is the rest of this agenda sort of going to fall?
Yeah, because that one's pretty easy for him. I mean,
it's very
he has
easy,
absolute authority to do that. He doesn't need to ask anybody. He just signs a pen.
Right, and I don't think it's like even that politically polarizing. Like,
yeah, it probably doesn't help him, but it's not like there's people lined up campaigning against him pardoning Ross that I've seen.
Yeah, agree. Right. Like, and I don't know, you do it now, you got to deal with it 2 or 3 years later. Like, who cares? I think it's fine. You got enough time on it. But yeah, that'll be the big one. He's not running
for re-election, so.
Right. So it doesn't matter there. I guess the other thing is like, the rumoring, I mean, there's so much of this, like who's going to do what sort of like coming through, is they, wants to knock down, what is the thing that lets banks not hold crypto?
Oh yeah. SAB 121.
Yeah, I knew you knew that off the top of your head. Like, so that'll be another one that'll be quick in the first couple of weeks that he'll have like authority to do. That's like an easy win.
Yeah, I agree with that. That is easy because it's also, I mean, let's face it, that's like more a handout to the traditional banks than it is to crypto anyway. The American
and it's bipartisan,
Banking Association. Right? Yeah. So I agree. I think that's an easy, quick win that continues the ball rolling on his signaling to crypto, and by the way, is good policy as well. Let's talk about what you said, because I agree. I think all of this could take longer, even if it does materialize, than people may realize or think. And I think a lot of the market action we've seen since the election, in my view, has been the market trying to price in the both likelihood and magnitude of positive catalysts coming from the new Trump administration and the new Congress. And so to me, there's a decent risk that we sort of range and languish for a while we actually wait for things to happen, right? Or they happen and they're not as bullish as expected, and right, there's so much positive anticipation. Like, how do you think about the first 6 months here of this? Because to me, that's been a real fear. It's one of the reasons why I've been relatively vocal downplaying the likelihood of a strategic Bitcoin reserve, is partially because I don't think Bitcoin needs it. And two, I'm concerned that if the market is so oriented and dependent on it happening, then they could become very disappointed if it doesn't happen. And that's just not necessary.
Yeah.
How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, like the industry has like a goldfish memory and attention span. So like if things aren't like, I think legitimately if by like the end of February stuff, like if we don't have an SPR, people are going to be upset. So like the expectations in general in our like industry are usually just way too high. And like the time frame that people operate on is so short. And you see this with the leverage too, right? So like if you got a bunch of people that have put like a bunch of positions on with the expectation of all of this like news carrying things like further quicker, like that gets unwound. So yeah, there's pressure from like pie in the sky expectations. The counter to it though is like, I don't know, maybe this like does like happen as rosy as sort of everybody expects it to, or like there's movement on things faster than it is. But I think it's priced a little bit to perfection at times. And like the industry has like a habit of doing that, of getting like overly excited about like, especially things with bureaucracy, right? Like it takes a while. Like even if everybody wants something, it doesn't mean you're getting it. Like this is very like, think about like when 2008 happened and like TARP took forever and they kept blowing it up. Like that was something that like had to happen and they like still couldn't get their act together. So I don't know. This is just like how government works. Unfortunately, it doesn't like move at the speed of like crypto in any capacity. So I just like want to like make sure. I do think there's a disconnect on those expectations and time frames. Like I always think there is, like no matter what. Like anytime like crypto is waiting on some government thing to happen, like it just always takes too long.
Yeah, even when it's a bad thing that's anticipated, like you take those new IRS rules and everybody's having a meltdown and they are bad. But then they were delayed.
It's all right, so it's like chill. Like, yeah. Yeah. Or like Mt. Gox, right? Like, I mean, how many years have that's been coming, right? People thought they were gonna like market sell it in like 2013. It's like, dude,
I know, and I was always laughing with that Japanese estate, the guy that runs the trustee, after like especially like last March, April, May, when they started putting out some statements, like if they moved some coins, they would then put out a statement like a day later. And it would be like, oh, we're just like moving stuff around, getting ready. And then the last sentence was always like, you will have to wait for additional time for more information or something. It was like, I was like, how much time? Like, it was like, yeah, please like stay tuned for a while, I think is what the translation would say.
I mean, that's that guy's life, right? I mean, he's been doing that 11 years now. Like, that's amazing. Like, that's effectively his career has been slow playing the Mt. Gox bankruptcy.
Yeah. Let's stick on this a little bit because like other things that I've seen that are very impactful on market sentiment broadly maybe on Bitcoin even more so as it's become such a institutionalized and widely held asset. But the macro situation also plays into what the administration may work on quickly. Looking at the dollar, looking at rates, the 10-year, like the dollar is acting like a wrecking ball right now all around the world. Even in our equity markets, I saw that the S&P 500 opened yesterday on Monday, the 13th, below where it opened pre-election, right? It's basically redid the whole election. Thing. Yeah, like what do you think? How is macro going to play in this year? How big of a risk is it to crypto markets in general?
I think it's a big risk as like Bitcoin in particular has gotten bigger and it's like gotten lodged in a more like traditional sort of like venture books, especially with MicroStrategy like owning so much of it and being in equity. That gives it a lot more beta, I think, to like traditional. So I think you're going to see those trade lock and step more. So if there's volatility in one, there's going to be volatility in the other. Not that there isn't volatility in Bitcoin already. But if there is like a headwind for equities, like you're going to see it play out in our world too. Like I mean, we saw this in 22 in particular, right? Like equity markets got smoked and like we just like way overshot it the same direction. So I think that's just the new normal. Like that's our life going forward. As far as like what's going to happen, I don't really have a good edge on it. I don't think a ton of people do. I think it's because there's so many unknowns. Like Trump's admin isn't even in yet. He also hasn't even gotten his people appointed yet. So like we got to do that dance before we can like even really start where stuff's going. I think the problem, and this is a little bit of a Trump unique one, is like he'll say something, the markets will react, and then like there's an expectation that he like walks comments back a little bit. He just doesn't. But then like maybe it doesn't really work out just like that. I mean, the tariffs are the biggie, right? Where he's like, we're going to have no income tax and there's going to be only tariffs. And then like, it's like, well, like what are you supposed to do with that information? And like markets sort of like react according. And then like, obviously it's not going to be that, but we got to get to a point where we like actually see where the path is going forward. So there's a lot of that going on, of the uncertainty sort of in the market. I mean, yields are rocketing higher every day. And it's just like putting pressure on equities. But the American economy is strong as hell. So I'm pretty confident we'll be able to work through it all. I'm not super worried about anything. I just think until there's a little more solid confirmation and language coming out of the appointments and like those people are communicating, we're going to just like trade in this like just unknownness when markets hate unknown. So they trade a little bit discounted. So I don't know. I'm not super worried about it. I think it's just like temporary. I mean, this all changes like in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you know, we're recording on Tuesday, January 14th, but this comes out on Thursday, the 16th. And that day, Scott Bessent's confirmation hearings occur in Congress. So
yeah, he may
presumably you'll get more, start to get more info.
Yeah, just power lift the whole thing. Yeah, you're going to get more info from every day until the end of January. So it'll be fine. I think America in particular is in a great spot. It feels good.
Let's spend a little bit of time on sort of the more crypto native stuff. I know you guys, follow and trade crypto markets actively. I think I've sort of described 24 as this barbell market. I think we might have even said this the last time we talked on this podcast. You had sort of this, bookended first by the ETFs launching in January and then Trump and the new Congress being elected in November, with basically 237 days of chop from March until November in Bitcoin. But that is sort of like as much as there is one in the crypto markets, a deep value, like OG, like institutional asset on one side, and then meme coin sort of mania on the other. Later, even now AI agent coins sort of also being in part of that. Now, a lot of that activity, maybe most of it occurring on Solana and some value accruing to some platforms from that activity. But the middle stuff, sort of, the 21 narratives, the NFTs, DeFi, I don't know, gaming, metaverse, didn't really capture market attention. I think DeFi was really useful. Like, it totally works, but it's not like the DeFi coins were like drawing a lot of interest then. What do you see as the crypto, outside of Bitcoin? What are the big crypto narratives that you are following now for this year where, there might be, movement?
Yeah, so there's the really speculative fervor in like the new issuance sort of non-venture backed token world, right? Like that's been meme coins. Now it's like AI, like, and it's still like some of the meme coins, but like that's like where the hottest of hot money is like playing at all given times. And a lot of that is like incredibly fast, right? Like token can launch on a Monday, it can be $500 million on a Thursday, and it can be like forgotten about by the next Friday. Like it's just like the arcs on these things are incredibly fast, but people like that, right? Like, because like, it's just look, there's a couple ways to gamble, right? You either gamble on something that's super volatile, or you like gamble on something with a bunch of leverage that's like a little less volatile. And so that's sort of how people are. I mean, most this is just a casino. A lot of it. The AI stuff at least has the meme coin stuff like is not trying to build anything, right? Maybe then like a hype in a community. The AI stuff is pitching it. I'm skeptical of most of it, maybe all of it. A lot of it is unclear if it's just like using the word AI and there's like some person that sits behind like a ChatGPT and like pumps out just like what is expected. So I am very skeptical that there's anything novel or interesting from the AI world being like done on chain right now. That could be wrong. I mean, this stuff's traded really well, so it's traded definitely as if I'm wrong. Like we haven't punted on anything in any size. But it's like really interesting, right? And like there's like clearly a demand and interest for like the AI sort of like exposure inside crypto. And there's like an idea that there'll be a convergence of the two and something will spit out some value. So yeah, people are really interested and they're just like willing to like fire bullets into like anything that like remotely has it. And sometimes even if they know it's a fraud, they don't care. They're just like, this is just doesn't matter. Like it's just like lifting all boats. So that's like definitely where like the hottest money right now as we see it is sort of playing. And that seems to be pretty it's Solana and Base. Like that seems to be the two spots people are playing. And then the other thing that's like really interesting and seems to be like where a lot of the speculative fervor is like the new issuance, especially some of these larger sort of projects that are out there. Hyperliquid set the tone, I think, for that going forward. That was like a massive success and launch. Like that obviously like didn't take in traditional venture sort of money, but it's traded up massively. It, at least from optically looking like, seems to be having a ton of users, like a ton of like trading activity. And there's now like a bunch of tokens that are launching there, like treating it very much like as its own L1. We played a little bit with that thing, like we got involved in it. So we sort of followed it very closely. And then now Barra in particular is going out. They have their contract address open where you can deposit. I think there's over $1 billion now. And that just seems to be growing faster and faster. And it's like also like for something that's not very easy to find, it's not like they're out there like promoting it. It still has like $1 billion. So like that just shows you some of the demand that's coming out. So that thing will probably trade up materially higher and like be a big win. And then you've got a bunch of other stuff like in the pipe, like Monad at some point is going to go out there. Like we're obviously like, involved in that one. We think that's going to be like a big one that's coming. What are some of the other bigger L1s that are slated to come out?
I mean, for new ones, it's tough. I mean, I'm outside of like Barra and Monad. I'm not really that aware of a lot of big pending ones.
I know Fogo is going to go out at some point. That'll be like another big one, I think.
I have to write these down. Never even heard of Fogo. It's not a bad name though.
It's not. It's Rob Sugarton. I don't know if you remember him from Jump. Yeah, and then he's been working with Mike Cahill on it. I'm trying to think of like other ones that are coming. But anyway, like there is like a bunch of this issuance that I think is going to come out that's going to trade hot. I think that's all going to be like super, like drawing in like interest. Like now the question is going to be like, all right, so it's like all this speculative fervor that's from like meme coins and AI is going to like move over to those. Like that's unclear. I don't know if that's like entirely like going to be set in stone yet. So we'll see how that sort of plays out. There's definitely this pervasive idea of like, if you took venture money, like you're against the ethos and like we don't want to like participate. So like we're just gonna like gamble on these other things that like we create. So there's like a little bit of that. So that we'll see how much that sticks over. But I don't know. I don't know how hard that. There's definitely a lot of people that like say that and like it's like a talking point. I just don't know how like true that is in actual like deployment of capital that sort of goes out there. I think it's like
too. On your point, both that point and before when you're talking about how the on-chain metas and these things like, you know, go like Icarus to the sun and then, you know, die quickly often. So much of that has been on-chain only. I don't think even any of these, very few meme coins or AI agent coins are actually traded on centralized exchanges, which is kind of a narrative and paradigm shift.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a big shift. Like a lot. I'd say this is like one of the... not the first time. I mean, you saw it with DeFi a little bit, right? Like a lot of stuff happened in DeFi for a while before it like moved on chain. The problem is the breadth of assets is just so big. I mean, I don't know, there's something like 20, 30,000 coins launched a day. I don't know, probably more than that now. It's a lot. The point is that whatever the number actually is, it's like too many. So the exchanges are just like taking a very much wait and see approach. So like something has to stick around for a little bit and have enough of a trading volume for them to like pick it and be like, and they are listing it, right? Like the stuff is making its way up. But it's like already been through 5 market life cycles in the last like 4 weeks of the thing. But then it's like hitting the sort of the tape there. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. Like if you're the listing guy at Coinbase and there's like 4,000 assets that have been listed in the last hour, like you're not going to like pay attention to any of them. Like, you can't. Like it just like doesn't make sense. And like a lot of times also like you have no idea who launched it. You have no idea who's like involved in it. Like you're unclear if there's like crime being committed. So you just like are like, I don't want to touch this. Like there's the risk reward here is terrible. So like we're just like not gonna play with it. Unless you can wait on it and like do some diligence, but it has to get to a certain size where you can justify doing that. So I think that's been the AI stuff will probably list quicker because there's less of them. Like you're not like they're not listing 500 new, I mean maybe they are, but like it's much easier to see like the ones that are like they don't have the meme coins just have this inertia to them where like you know it has no value and like you're just trading that momentum. Like the AI stuff is like not on that same level of like nihilism.
They might do something. The agent may one day build something or trade something. There is that possibility. Whereas the meme coins are for the most part expressly not that.
Right. Like, this cat.
They're basically just fungible NFTs, right? Like they're.
Yeah, even the NFTs, at least, I don't know.
That's
I'm
true.
not like passing judgment on anything. It's just like,
yeah.
I have no issue with people trading or doing any of this stuff, and I don't view them as like toxic or negative for the industry. Like I don't have like strong opinions about their like value in the ecosystem or anything like that. I just like it's a lot harder to look at it and be like, there's a plan here. And like the NFTs, like I think it's silly, and like a lot of times it's like bullshit and they're just like doing hand waves, but like at least they're conceptually putting something out there.
Yeah.
You're never getting that with most of the meme coins.
No, and there is like I would argue blue chip NFT space like art blocks or generative art where there is no like blue chip meme coin. I mean, I guess Doge, just because it's a large cap meme coin, but it also does nothing, right? Really?
Yeah, right. It's like size and time are like the two variables.
Yeah. I know we both have to drop soon. So before on this AI topic, I wanted to ask you about the intern, CMS, formerly CMS intern. Would you even have one, or is the next CMS intern going to be like an AI agent? Like, is he going to be out of a job soon?
Oh, that's a good question. No, because like I'm too old to be like the person disrupting. I'll have to hire him to like disrupt his own job, right? Like the next one will be the last because it's like on the way out, you'll be like, listen, like you got to get it. We all know what's going to happen here. Let's get you a nice little package together, but then like this is going to run it going forward.
Because even this platform we're recording on, Riverside, can actually like use AI to edit the video for us and produce social clips. So
amazing.
Phineas, watch out, buddy. Well, Dan, it's always great talking to you. I'm really excited to see your never-ending commentary and snarky commentary on the market. Please tweet more. I feel like you've been taking a little bit of a break, I feel like, or maybe it's just Elon's algorithm that's been rugging me for some reason.
Dude, the algo like is not nice to me at times. And so I found this, if you, and maybe this is me just like doing the crazy hand wave like thing, but like if you take a break, like let's say you take from like Christmas to New Year's off, like it murders you. Like it does so, like it's like, where are you? Like it knows, it's like, listen, if you're not here every day showing up, like you're out. And so like I think I got buried. I think if you take any time off, it like really, really hurts you for a while until you get back up. Yeah.
No, I know. And like I've seen high quality information driven tweets that I put out do really well. Then very similarly ones do bad. But if I put out a picture of me, sipping a beer in front of my grill, it gets 250 likes. It's actually pretty hard to grok, no pun intended, what's going on with it.
Yeah. No, you're right. And it's also like it's an evolving beast, right? Like.
Yeah, I feel like they're tweaking it. Maybe we'll get one day like more open source or like transparent algos out of these AI-driven tools now, because we have no idea what the black box of X.com is thinking.
I don't think they know. I think it's just right. It's just its own beast in itself. But yeah, no, I'll just tweet a bunch of pictures of dogs and stuff and see if it gets me up there.
See if it works. All right, well, that's it for this time. My friend Dan the Man Matuszewski from CMS Holdings, thank you so much for coming on Galaxy Brains.
Anytime. Have fun at that party.
That's it for this week's episode of Galaxy Brains. Thanks to our guest, Dan Matuszewski from CMS Holdings, and our good friend Bimnet Abibi from Galaxy Trading. As always, everyone have a safe and happy presidential inauguration weekend, and we will see you next week. Thanks for listening to Galaxy Brains, the weekly podcast from Galaxy Research. If you enjoy the show, please like, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To follow Galaxy Research, sign up for our weekly newsletter at gdr.email, read our content at galaxy.com/research, and follow us on Twitter at GLXYResearch. See you next week.